Good evening and welcome to the Somerville Redevelopment Authority meeting of December 16, 2025. My name is Phil Ercolini. I'm the chair of the Somerville Redevelopment Authority. I call this meeting to order at 5:34 p.m. Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, this public meeting of the SRA is being conducted via remote participation. This session will be recorded and will be a public record. I will now ask the board members to confirm they are in attendance in an alphabetical order. Courtney Brunson is not here this evening. Ben Ewan Campen is also not here this evening. William Gage,
I'm present.
Patrick McCormick,
Present.
Christine Stone,
Present.
and myself, Phil Ercolini, are in attendance, and we do have a quorum. So I'll now ask Ben City to present a few of the house rules about using the technology. Ben?
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, everyone. My name is Ben Demers. I'm a senior planner in economic development with the city, and I also serve as the staff support to the Somerville Redevelopment Authority, or the SRA, as we will discuss it in this evening's meeting. I'm going to also take a moment to mention some other staff that are on this evening. So we're joined by Catherine Lester-Salkert, who is special counsel to the Redevelopment Authority. We then have Ted Fields, who's also a senior planner with economic development, and Katie Weiss, who is also a planner with economic development. So just running through some items for this evening. When an agenda item is being presented tonight, any presentation materials that staff have received ahead of time will be displayed on the screen. If participants wish to direct the board's attention to a specific page, they should verbally note which page staff should show on the screen and should verbally explain to the board what is being shown. Please also note that this meeting is being conducted remotely using Zoom webinar in order to comply with open meeting law from the state, which doesn't allow for what is called side conversation. The chat function amongst attendees has been disabled. If you as an attendee have a question or would like to make a comment on any of the matters discussed tonight, please use the raise hand function to indicate that you would like to speak. I will unmute participants one by one and give you 2 minutes to speak. And if you do make comment, when it's your turn, please clearly state your name and address before saying anything else. After 2 minutes, your microphone will then be muted. Please also remember that any questions asked by attendees this evening will be a part of the open record. And I'm going to pass things over to the SRA's special counsel, Catherine Salkert.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Catherine Salkert, special counsel to the SRA. Just want to remind all SRA members that all votes must be made with a motion and a second and should be roll call votes. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Okay, so we'll head right to the agenda, and item number 1 is approval of the minutes of the November 24th, 2025 general meeting. Did all of the members have an opportunity to review the minutes? And
Yep.
if so, are there any amendments or changes? Any questions relative to that?
I didn't see anything.
Okay, Bill, thank you for that. So we don't have any, so I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes. Bill Gage makes a motion to approve. Is there a second? Patrick McCormick seconds, and we'll do a roll call vote. Courtney Brunson and Ben Ewan Campen are not here this evening. William Gage,
Yes.
Patrick McCormick,
Yes.
Christine Stone,
Yes.
and myself, Phil Ercolini, have voted to approve the minutes of the November 24th, 2025 general meeting. The next item on the agenda, item number 2, is public comment period. And I'll defer to Ben. Any members of the public who'd like to address the members?
For you, Mr. Chair, there are 4 members of the public in attendance this evening. Just want to give a second. If anybody would like to make comment up top, you're welcome to raise your hand. I'll also just note that if you have comments on any of the items as we are discussing them, generally the chair will also take questions at that time. All right, Mr. Chair, I'm not seeing any hands.
All right, thank you, Ben. Maybe later on. Item number 3 of the agenda is 90 Washington Street, and item A is a project schedule update. Who will be given that, Ben?
Through Mr. Chair, I'll provide that update. Just give me 1 second to get screens set up. All right, can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Perfect. And just let me bring your faces back up so that I can see you. And I just also want to make a quick note that Rachel Nutcarney, Director of Economic Development, joined the meeting. Okay, so for both of these items for A and B, both are related to 90 Washington Street. They'll go in the order in which they are on the agenda, but I'm going to kind of walk us through both of them since the kind of substantive part is talking through the RFP feedback. So we shared a draft of the RFP on Friday along with a memo. This really represents the next major milestone in our process for redeveloping 90 Washington Street. The agenda for this evening is pretty focused. First, I'm going to walk through some updates from our last meeting, see where we are in the overall redevelopment process, with the next step being to finalize and release a request for proposals or an RFP. And I'll provide a little bit more detail on what we anticipate the next steps being. And then second, we're going to walk through the draft RFP itself. I'm going to share some feedback that we heard from the Civic Advisory Committee for 90 Washington Street, who we met with yesterday evening, and then also collect any feedback from SRA members. Our goal for today is to get to a place where we are comfortable approving of an RFP draft this evening. I do want to make sure, though, that everyone has a chance to review and give feedback, and that we have enough time that you're able to see that feedback integrated into the draft. So we can also take time after this meeting to add feedback, bring back an updated version. Both of those timelines are workable, but I'm going to facilitate some live editing this evening. And if we do get to a place where we feel generally comfortable with the draft, we could also look to do a vote this evening. Are there any questions up top? Okay, great. Okay, so since the last time we met, at that meeting, the SRA approved of amendments to the demonstration project plan and the accompanying memorandum of agreement between the City Council and the Redevelopment Authority that just set expectations for the redevelopment of 90 Washington Street. Since that meeting, the council met the day after, and they also approved those changes to the documents. So those documents are officially amended. And then they also, at that meeting on November 25th, they approved the detailed development objectives and the program of uses that came out of the public engagement process. So this was really the next step that was laid out in the demonstration project plan, was that the council needed to approve of the outcome of this process. And then that tees us up for the next step, which is for the SRA to draft and release a request for proposals to select a development partner. And the intention is that the RFP really reflects those development objectives and the program of uses that were approved by the council. So that is what we're going to get into discussing. Before we get into the RFP itself and the draft, I do want to just kind of look ahead at what the process that we expect to come next is, and then we can get into the specific draft of the text. So looking ahead at the timeline, our goal currently, if we're able to approve the document this evening or even in early January, is to release this document in January. We're saying January 12th as a rough date right now. That seems feasible based on the speed that we're moving. Once that is released, the RFP is going to be open for about 3 months. A couple of weeks after we release the document, we'll have a virtual tour and then also a developer roundtable, so kind of a Q&A session where we're able to answer questions, and we'll then be answering questions periodically throughout the RFP period. RFP responses would then be due April 10th, and once we receive responses, there's going to be a few phases of reviewing those proposals. First, the Civic Advisory Committee is going to be reviewing the technical elements of the proposals, meaning the non-financial components of the project. So in that review, they're also going to be interviewing any of the development teams that move forward, and then they're going to summarize that feedback and provide that feedback to the City Council. The second phase of reviewing proposals is going to be at the City Council. And so the City Council will review proposals adding in the financial element. So they'll look at both the technical or the kind of qualitative and then also the financial element of the proposals. So they're really going to see the full picture. They're going to be reviewing that in executive session. And then based on their review and also the feedback from the CAC, they're going to make a recommendation of 2 finalists to move forward to the SRA. At that point, staff can then initiate what's called a best and final offer period. This is something we've discussed with HRNA, the financial consultant or the real estate consultant for the project. And really, this just allows the 2 firms that are selected to move forward to update any portion of their proposal to make them more competitive. And then lastly, the SRA will decide which developer moves forward or at that time, they can choose to reject all proposals. So the goal is that if we have proposals in on April 10th, the CAC is able to work within about a month, so sometime mid-April to mid-May, with reviewing those proposals, providing initial feedback, and also interviewing development teams. And then the city council will meet probably in both meetings in May if we're able to keep this timeline, and come to a final recommendation in their second May meeting. That would then tee us up to have that best and final offer period, which would last probably about a month or a little bit over, which would then leave us around mid-July for making a decision from the redevelopment authority. So that is kind of the rough timeline that we're working on. Again, this is all target. It can all shift around a bit. And we do want to be aware that we're going into the summer in that case, looking at the SRA to make a decision sometime in July. So we want to be wary of that. But we also want to make sure that, the Civic Advisory Committee and the City Council have enough time to make their decision and feel confident in what's moving forward. If we reach a point where the council is deciding to move forward with the development firm sometime in July, we would then work with that firm over the next several months to start negotiating the land development agreement. And then they'll also be doing some due diligence work at that time. So the goal is that we're signing a land development agreement sometime late November, early December. So really before the end of 2026. And then that would tee us up to have the project start its entitlement process in 2027 with the goal of closing on the land in September of 2027. So this is kind of a rough timeline that we are looking at currently. Before I get into the RFP text, does anyone have any questions about this kind of overall process?
On Ben, on the target and the closing date,
Yes.
September. Is that too far out? Or, I mean, how does that sync with the bonds?
Sure. So we have discussed this timing with the financial team, with the city's financial team. And so we feel generally that this both is fairly ambitious in terms of, moving expeditiously on each of these steps, but is also kind of realistic for the time in which this can happen. So the bond timeline is around February is essentially the date when it comes up for renewal. So
And that's February of 2027 or 2028?
I can't speak completely intelligently to all the logistics of the bond, but essentially each year in February it can come up for renewal. So it was initially issued in February of 2025. It then would need to be extended from February 2026 to 27, and then can be further extended beyond that. So this is something that our financial team feels comfortable with. If we receive any updates or any concerns from them, we can definitely shift this, but they have kind of signed off or given their endorsement of this strategy.
All right, thank you.
And question on the bonds. So once a year, I suspect is what you're saying, they come up for, well, for lack of a better word, a review or a process. Is the interest rate impacted at that time, and up or down? And maybe if you don't have the answer, probably Christine knows. But
Judging her face, I'm not sure.
Okay.
But through to the chair, I'm not sure if every year that it is extended, if the interest rate is reevaluated at that point. I actually don't even want to make a conjecture of an answer. I'm not completely sure about that. In speaking with the chief financial officer of the city, the amount paid in interest for the first year of the bond and the second year, they have not predicted it to be significantly different. So potentially if the interest rate is changing slightly, it is changing slightly, but not enough to significantly swing the payment.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. I can't see Christine, so I don't know if her hand is up or not, but I'll
Hi.
defer to you. There you are.
Hi, Phil. I'll just say, no, I don't know what the terms of the bond are, so I can't.
Speak to it.
I
Okay.
know less than Ben on that one.
Okay. All right. Okay. I'm sure we'll hear more if this impacted negatively, particularly. All right.
Well, the only thing I would say is I suspect interest continues to accrue. So the longer the bonds are outstanding, the more or the greater the interest payment that will be due when they are paid off in full. But I think what I also heard Ben say is there's this other element of the RFP process, which is how much time is realistic with respect to the developer going through what they need to go through to get the land entitled. And what Ben and HRA and Ben and the team have laid out is something they think is realistic, but like fast, but realistic.
Okay.
So they don't want to put something down that's faster than that and under with the understanding, like, not sure the city and the amount of public meetings that will be required can actually occur during that period of time. So let's not start there. Let's start with something realistic. Is
Yeah.
it correct,
Yeah.
Ben?
That's correct. And I want to just make one more comment before I see that Kathy also has her hand up. So from my understanding, the annual interest is being paid as it is accruing rather than like adding to a total that is paid later. So the city for this first year of the bond anticipatory note is paying, I believe, just under 500,000 in interest for the bond, given that the bond is roughly $15 million.
Okay.
And Kathy, were you going to add any details to that or just?
No, just going to say that it is fixed for each of the years. And just as you were saying, Ben, it's not going to change dramatically if we're in September rather than February. It's when you get beyond a short-term bond that you might have to refinance. And right now, with the interest rates going down, that might actually end up working in our favor. But I think Ben stated it very, very well.
Okay.
That, well,
Go ahead, Christine.
thank you. And I, though I spoke to Ben earlier today, and I guess I was making a comment that, we should all be mindful that we will need to be meeting in late June, early July based on that schedule. And that traditionally we don't meet in July. So I think if any of us know, like, we're not going to be around that time of year, that we should raise our hand now if we know, but if we don't know, but now, but maybe we know, and as the 2026 comes along and expires, that person should let everybody know, because if we don't have these are going to be some major decisions, and so we'll need a quorum.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that Ben and I talked about, can we accelerate it? And when Ben starts to lay out everything that needs to happen, it's really hard to accelerate that schedule.
Well, I'm available if we're doing a straw poll here.
Yeah, and we'll obviously do kind of more formal scheduling as we get closer. I think once we also formally release the RFP, we can lock in some of those, what are currently just kind of placeholder target dates. And we'll start trying to do that as soon as possible. Also with the Civic Advisory Committee, since they will have a few meetings in which they're interviewing the developers and also just kind of coming to a final recommendation about things. We want to make sure that those dates are locked in.
Okay. All right, any more questions have been on this part of it? Okay.
Okay, so I can move to the next portion, which I think is technically part B on the agenda.
Yes. It's a review of the draft request for proposals for 90 Washington Street Development Partner.
Perfect, thank you. So I'm going to shift over to have us discuss the text of the RFP draft itself. I'm going to walk through the sections a little bit, talk about some of the feedback we got from the CAC, and then my goal is to facilitate some live editing on the document and to get to a place again where we're comfortable voting to approve of the language and allow staff to release this sometime in January. So that is the goal. Again, if we need a bit more time, that is also okay. So I'm going to shift over to the document in a second. It's currently split into 7 sections. We have an executive summary up top, a project background section, development program and objectives, zoning entitlement approach, submission requirements and instructions, evaluation and developer selection process, and then appendices. I'm going to take a second to stop sharing and switch to the different document. Okay. Great. So I'm just going to kind of walk through those again. So we have an executive summary about 1 page summarizing, and then the milestones. This is kind of a condensed version of some of the milestones that I just discussed with you, which are most relevant for the public and for a developer who might be responding. We then have a project background section. So we talk about regional and neighborhood context, some of the market context for somebody who might want to be developing here, and then some of the site conditions and history also for the site. We then have a section on development. Sorry, there's like a pop-up from Zoom that perfectly blocks my text. But this is the development objectives and the program of uses. So this is really trying to take that document that we worked on with the Civic Advisory Committee, reflect that language here, and just kind of add some more detail for the sake of an RFP. So kind of how would somebody actually meet those goals? We then have a zoning and entitlement strategy. Since that has been such a big part of the conversation, we felt it was worthwhile to kind of have its own section. So whether somebody is looking to rezone the parcel to an existing high-rise or mid-rise district, or do special zoning or some combination of these things, we've kind of laid out what that process might look like here. We then have submission requirements and instructions. So talking about the 2 sections of the proposal. And so each proposal will have both a technical proposal and then a financial offer. And the technical proposal consists of various components. So a cover letter that summarizes the project, a narrative, the development program, and a site plan. The zoning and entitlement strategy that we expect for the project and the timeline that they would be doing this on. And then some pieces here around qualifications of the team and how they are organized. So these are fairly standard for an RFP for development. And then the financial offer. So again, fairly standard components here, financial capability. So, what is the history of actually financing a project like this and what capital do you have access to? And then also the financial plan and the timing of proceeds. So what do you expect the finances for your development project to be? And then also the kind of financial offer component of the project. And then beyond this, in terms of evaluation, so this kind of lays out what the process is going to be. This is really reflecting what we discussed earlier. And then we have a section here on our evaluation approach. So really how we are imagining rating each of these sections. And this is really better reflected within an evaluation criteria section. So kind of a different points section here on how we are weighting various parts of the proposal. And then we have appendices at the end. So we're going to come back to different components of this as people have comments. I just wanted to kind of roughly walk through things. And I'm going to shift back to our notes document. I'm going to be shifting around between a few documents this evening. So like I mentioned, we met yesterday with the Civic Advisory Committee. I wanted to share some initial feedback. I really heard kind of 2 main comments from CAC members yesterday evening. One of these was a desire for reworking the evaluation weighting. So that table that we showed you that had out of 100 points, how we would rate different proposals. There was a desire for reworking that evaluation a bit to prioritize how proposals meet the non-financial objectives. So when we sent this out on Friday, the way that this was split was 60% for the financial component and then 40% for the technical component. And so there was a desire to see more weight put on how somebody is meeting the development objectives, especially given how much the Civic Advisory Committee has spent discussing these. And then there was also some concern that was expressed over the complexity of the process for what one CAC member mentioned is a fairly routine project. So worrying that there's kind of a level of this is a little complicated in terms of rezoning afterwards and needing to work with the city to go through this process. And also just kind of re-expressing some frustration with the decision to rezone later in the process. We've obviously talked a bit about that here and the decision to rezone either before releasing the RFP versus after, and ultimately deciding to rezone after in partnership with the selected development team. But that came up a bit in yesterday's conversation also. I also, last thing before I kind of start shifting into actually facilitating feedback, I also was able to connect with Councilor Ewan Campen and Courtney Brunson, so the 2 SRA members who are not able to attend this evening. Courtney Brunson didn't have any specific feedback. We just talked about some different parts of the process. Councilor Ewan Campen, the one thing that he did express is that similar to the first comment here, that we could maybe tweak the evaluation criteria somewhat away from the financial goal towards the technical side of things. He specifically was noting we could put a little bit more focus on the zoning evaluation. So I think when we start to talk about the document, we can maybe talk about playing with those values a little bit to make sure that we're taking in some of this feedback. And then Christine and I, as Christine mentioned, we also met earlier today to start walking through some of her feedback. She's going to make those same comments publicly during this meeting, but I have started to add some edits to the document in response to that feedback. And so I'll kind of walk through that as we go. Just want to flag that I'm going to move over to like a red line version of the RFP draft, essentially. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing for 1 second. I'm going to pull up the RFP draft. Okay, we can all see this draft? Great. So I want to open things up to comments, and then when we get to the weighted, essentially how proposals are being evaluated later, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about what that weighting should be. Christine, I don't know if you want to start things off, given that I've already made some changes in response, but do you want to walk through some of your different comments?
Sure. Let me see. So, my first comment was on page, I think it's 2. It's like the first page, yeah. So page 2, second paragraph, this is very much, is a high level description of the opportunity. And my suggestion was to take, in that, they list rents, both residential rents in a certain range and commercial rents in a certain range, and they talk about average rents. And my comment to Ben was, first of all, let's take that range out. I don't think that detail, it's extraneous information. Any developer is going to do their own research on what the rents are in the area. And then second, by its nature, this will be a new project, and it will be demanding some of the highest rents in the area. And so, which hopefully is above, obviously above the average. So let's just remove that information from the RFP. Keep the vacancy information, but remove the rents.
Ben, can we expand on that paragraph so I can't really, yes, thank you.
Yes. Christine, you'll start to see as we get later in the document that I've made like direct edits based on some of the feedback for this one. I just want a chance to connect with HRNA to see if they have any feedback about, whether there are like Class A rents that it makes sense to list here. And if not, then I think we'll just remove this text.
That's fine. Should I continue? Do people have?
Yeah, I just want to give Phil a second. I can
Yes,
see that he's
okay.
reading.
Yeah, okay.
No, I agree. In reading it, I do agree with that. It's given the time frame, those things could change, correct, Christine? So
They could, and yes, they could. And again, they're talking about average rents, which include sort of like older product that's maybe 30, 40 years old that
Yeah.
won't be as nice as this.
Yeah.
Because it's just older and dated, and
Yeah.
then the higher rent. So
I agree with that. Everybody else on board with that?
Yeah.
Looks.
There was another, so going back, Ben, oh, so my other comment was where it's respondents to this request for proposals should provide blah, blah, blah. There's 4 bullets. My comment is in the 4th bullet. And that, which is, and it comes up later as a lot of this is kind of blown up and more detailed. but that a financial offer to purchase the site should also include some information about the sources of capital and the approval process for each of those sources of capital.
Yeah, through Mr. Chair to Member Stone, I'm just gonna scroll. Sorry if this is nauseating to anybody. Please look away. I added that in so we are now in section 5 on submission requirements and instructions under the financial offer component, section 8 financial capability, part B. I added in description of the sources of, so it previously said description of the sources of equity and or debt respondent believes will be attracted to investing in this project. And I added and the approval process for obtaining this equity debt. So I made the change here rather than in the executive summary. I can do both, but figured, as you mentioned, this is really kind of the blown up version where people get more detail.
And Christine, another question to you, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, typically in a pro forma, it's sources and uses, correct? Would we
Yeah.
not want to know that from a developer?
Well, by its nature, the pro forma should have. I think there's some again. There's some
Yeah,
detail right down here.
So the pro forma comes in the next section. So this is the financial capability. So that's really more focused on sources.
Okay.
But then in the financial planning, it kind of gets more into the uses and the anticipated revenue and expenses over time.
Okay, all right. Okay.
Yeah.
Are we comfortable with the change just being made here, or do you want to make sure it's reflected in the executive summary also?
Can we go back to the executive? What does it say? Financing, financial offer accompanied by a detailed pro forma. I mean, it's fine.
Okay.
Yeah. Mhm.
And then I believe the next section was adding a line here under
Correct.
developer selection for the LDA, which I've done in the one below, and I'm realizing I did not do for the for this in the executive session. So let me add.
So my comment here was, there's this big gap in time, right? From July of 26 to September of 27. And there will be interim steps, and I think we should just list that interim step. And what Ben is listing is, I would just say execution there instead of signing, but that will become that LDA or land development agreement will be the binding document. So from November, let's say from November of based on this anticipated date, end of November through September, the parties will be bound via a contract as opposed to having this, what is it, 15, 16-month period of time where I just think it's important to detail that. The point being is that from July to November, there's going to be a lot of work that's happening on both sides to sign that LDA.
Yeah.
And again, that's what will bind the buyer and the city and the SRA with respect to the process.
I agree.
The other thing we talked about, Ben, I'm sorry, going back to that timeline. So the developer interviews, so what's listed there
Oh, yes.
about a week. But let's say, and my other comment was, let's say there are 3 to 5 developers that the parties, the city, the CAC, et cetera, will want to interview just to add another week there. Because if let's say it's 5 developers, a week is a really
Right.
that's fast. For public meetings and folks to come together at night to do that interviewing. So just give it a little bit more time there. Yeah. So that was
Yeah. Thank you. I had made that change in the one down below and should have reflected it here. Thank you.
Yeah, and then
I think the main point on project background, so initially the reason that the section on with Cobble Hill Apartments and Union Square, et cetera. The reason that these were bulleted is we were initially thinking about doing some graphics with them. And actually, sorry, one note I should make about this, which I explained when it was sent out. This is not the final graphic version necessarily. There might be some final little updates. We're trying to keep things still fairly simple and straightforward, and we're using Word for it, but there's going to be a little bit of sprucing. But these are not going to become callouts in the way that we were considering doing. So I've just restructured this a bit, added a section that says significant adjacencies, and just added a sentence saying the site is surrounded by significant existing developments and new investment. And so then I talk about, we have the various paragraphs about significant adjacent developments and new investment. So Cobble Hill Apartments, the different development in Union Square and Brick Bottom and Boynton Yards. So just kind of different examples of projects here. Also, Christine added back in that reference to 495 Columbia, or sorry, I added back in that reference to 495 Columbia, just an additional development in Boynton Yards outside of the Boynton Yards master plan. But this is still fairly straightforward, but I think the editing in the version it was sent to you might have been somewhat confusing. So I just wanted to note this.
Fine. Is the keep going. That's it. There was if you go back, there's like a lane 2 something. There was yeah, right there where it's red, it's underlining
Thank you.
red. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
I don't think we had any feedback on the development program and objectives. And again, I know this is just running through Christine's comments. If Phil, Bill, and Patrick, as you have comments, I also want to make sure that we're incorporating that, just kind of running through to make sure I address Christine's.
And then I don't have a comment until page 12. Okay, yeah.
So yeah, I cut this out. I agree that it's fairly expected. And I think we're doing enough to just draw attention to some of the regulatory requirements in Somerville. So we have here reference to the IZ policy for new housing development, to the linkage fees for new commercial development, and then also just some context here about parking.
Okay. That one paragraph, folks, is what would you say? It's extra. It's not needed. It's sort of already been stated in the information above. Yes, that significant.
Sure.
Yeah,
and for city staff, this is
will be needed.
Yeah, this is essentially just talking about the different massing studies, essentially, or not just massing studies, but the different documentation that comes up during our zoning process. I will say in general, all 4 of these are just examples, and this one probably felt like the most, like, it doesn't necessarily need to be stated. It's probably more obvious for these larger developments. Some of these policies, like our specific IZ rate and our specific linkage fees, those did seem worthwhile to keep called out. So I think that's fine for us to
Yeah,
cut that.
yeah, exactly. That, yeah, totally.
Patrick.
Yeah, I was curious to ask everyone, but maybe particularly Christine on this, because I think my broad thoughts were kind of counterpoints to the advisory committee, and just on the entitlement and zoning, I wanted to ask if, from a developer's perspective, because I know it's very complex, we sufficiently, I think you have here, but sufficiently conveyed the complexity, but also range of possibilities, since we're talking about the potential for the zoning changes. So, versus it being too complex, I wanted to make sure a wide range of developers would understand the possibilities as well as the constraints, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Yeah, I personally feel good about the balance here. I am curious to hear from other members. So we've tried to capture here that rezoning can either be to an existing district or to kind of a new high density district, which would be done through our special district process. And so that's where, we would be able to work with them. I think this is kind of a key operative sentence. So if necessary, the city will support the adoption of custom dimensional standards, permitted uses, site development standards, parking and mobility requirements, and other provisions. So I think that that gets at a lot of what is relevant for somebody who's maybe looking at our zoning and saying, what exactly does a special district do? Well, it allows you to have some specificity in each of these different points. But curious also if there are any questions or thoughts from other members.
I personally, I like the flexibility.
Yeah.
Given the nature of the the constraints that we're under, I do like the flexibility.
I do also hate to anticipate a question and then not like give the answer to that question, but I could imagine if there is any confusion about this, that's why we have the Q&A period built in a couple of weeks or in a few weeks once the RP is released. And so if there is confusion about like what exactly are we getting at here with the zoning process, we can also give more context at that time. I think that's one I'll be prepared to talk about in a little more detail in that session.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, agreed.
Yeah,
All right. Are there any?
I'm sorry, I was trying to think of how to respond, but yeah, I think the way the RFP is laid out, it's not, it's very high level and but it gives the reader and the RFP responder a sense of what, that the city, this will be a partnership with the city. There's multiple paths you can go down, and essentially it's up to the developer to come back and think about what it is that they could do on the site, and then have that conversation with the city.
Yeah.
So I think that's all laid out. Because the existing zoning is civic. I mean, it's like
Right.
the only thing you could build on site as of right is like a school building or I don't know, a new city hall or something like that, a civic building. And so everybody is understanding that that is not what is the highest and best use. So, the city we are saying, hey, there's some flexibility here. Yes, that we have the mid-rise, a high-rise, but we're even willing to do the creation of a new high-rise district,
Yeah.
and let us know what your ideas are. I mean, that's essentially how this RFP is laid out. And show us your listing, show us your site plan. Just show, we're willing to work with you, but we need to see what you're thinking before we select you.
Great. Great.
Okay. Are there any other comments on zoning and entitlement approach before I shift down to the submission instructions? No. Okay. And then I made that grammar edit you noted, Christine. And then similarly, so under the development program and site plan, so Christine had made a note, just kind of making it clear that it's not just a site plan, like we're trying to have an understanding of the massing of the buildings that they are proposing. So I just added site and massing plan here. And then noted under Part D that we're interested in the site plan illustrating building footprint, circulation, open space, general massing, and the relationship of the proposal to adjacent parcels.
Great.
And then the one other edit I made here was in the financial component. We talked through this already. I just added this clarification. So for under the financial offer, under financial capability, provide audited financial statements for the development team's prime partner covering the past 3 fiscal years. So just making that clear.
Okay.
Christine, is that I team here seemed like a flexible enough phrase.
I mean, yeah, what you want to get is the company's financial statements. You don't want to get an individual's like tax return or something like that. I think that's what you're asking for. And so when you say prime partner, that to me is not that could be potentially confusing, but
yeah. Let me flag this for HRNA just to say like this confusion came up. I think that we have the same understanding of what we're actually getting at here, and just make sure that the language there is reflecting this adequately.
Yep. Okay.
I think this is probably just one where like my personal vocabulary is not up to par. Okay, and then again, I'm going to come back through this. I'm just noting some changes that were made. I think that actually captures everything that we talked through. Yeah, and then this timeline also does capture.
That's,
Okay.
yeah, okay.
Does anyone else, I know that we've kind of, Patrick, thank you for stopping me in the zoning section specifically. Does anyone have any feedback on any of the other sections we've talked through or specifically getting into the submission requirements and instructions? And Patrick, I see your hand up.
Oh, well, are we including the question about scoring and weighting, or is that next?
That's next. I want to do kind of yeah.
Okay, well, that's where I was I'll wait then.
Perfect.
And Ben, I don't know if you want to talk about, how you intend to receive the information and then share the information. There's really two parts. Some of it will be shared, some of it
To the responses. Yeah, I can make that clear. So we referenced this in the RFP. It's kind of at the end of the section here. So people are going to be submitting through an online form that will essentially have two sections. One will be for the technical proposal and one will be for the financial offer. And the technical proposal is what is going to be shared publicly with the Civic Advisory Committee members. So that's what they'll be reviewing. And through that, it's also just going to be kind of generally available. And then the technical component is not going to be, or sorry, the financial component is not going to be made public. So that's only going to be brought into executive session with the city council. And then it can also be discussed in executive session with the redevelopment authority. It will only be public at the point of somebody being selected and kind of the details of that agreement being made public. But the other proposals the other financial proposals put forward won't be made public. And this was, again, something that we decided at the recommendation of HRNA, just generally increases comfort for development firms that are bidding on these parcels. Didn't foresee any major issues with that, but did just want to flag it. Thanks, Christine. Okay, are there any other comments on submission requirements and instructions or the evaluation before I get into those specific, that table? Okay. Let's talk about this table. So in the evaluation and developer selection process, we have kind of the criteria here and then the laid out criteria in a point system. So the idea here is just that it's making things easier to interpret, obviously, by putting it out of 100 points. I've already started to make some suggested edits, but I will walk through those in a second. The way this was done initially was weighed 60 for the financial criteria, 40 for the technical criteria. And again, this is really trying to make clear that, a main priority of this project is the financial return. However, a main comment we got from the Civic Advisory Committee from multiple members was, we put a lot of work into the objectives for this project, and we want to make sure that that is weighed significantly. And, this project is going to stand for a long time. Like, obviously the qualitative elements of this that we all know do matter, want to make sure are reflected in this evaluation criteria. And Councilor Ewan-Campen similarly made a comment that the zoning and entitlement strategy maybe could be, the weight there could be increased by removing slightly from the financial criteria. So I started to play around with this and have put forward something here that essentially makes them even. So financial criteria and technical criteria both worth 50 points total. So I've just kind of removed 5 points from the financial plan and 5 from the financial offer, and then just kind of accordingly shifted some of the points below. So again, these points here add up to the bold. And then for technical criteria, I've focused here on increasing the project understanding and development concept. So taking that from 15 points to 25 points. This is really looking at kind of what is actually being proposed on the parcel. And then from that, I increased the clarity of the proposed development vision and alignment with city objectives from 8 to 18 points. I gave that full 10 points there. I also, just in reviewing this text again, in the interest of kind of consolidating and showing the points, there is a point here on demonstrated understanding of community priorities and planning context. I think that is essentially what we are getting at by alignment with city objectives. So I have just removed that here. And again, the objectives we're talking about here, a lot of this is really what the Civic Advisory Committee had expressed. So I don't know if it makes sense to be separating that into two. So I just condensed that down a bit, which I know can be a little confusing in this moment, but just wanted to flag that. But I would love to hear other proposals for how else this might be shifted around. This doesn't necessarily address Councillor Ewan Campion's comment, although I think, zoning does come up in multiple places. So obviously we have the 10 points here for the zoning and entitlement. And then we also have experience with public sector partners through rezoning and entitlement. Like I do think it's represented here fairly significantly. But if others agree that it could be better represented, then we can also increase those points. Patrick.
Well, I guess, and through you, Mr. Chair, I guess my concern is, if not for our primary objective to recover city funds, what would this split otherwise look like? Because I get it. I like giving more points to all these other things, but I just want to suggest, we need to keep our eye on the ball. And, I'm not sure folks are seeing it in a way that it's money the city is losing if
Sure.
there's less money that represents an opportunity cost to everything else the city does.
Right.
So, that's why I'm a little concerned, if we take points away from the offer. I don't have a super strong view here. I'm just kind of presenting that counterpoint, and I'm curious what others think. And I guess my question, to the team, is this still more heavily weighted towards financial than a project would otherwise be given these circumstances?
Interesting.
Because I'm just not sure we can afford to say, well, that was a really good offer and it was certainly more money, but we're going to give it to these other folks. And essentially we're taking some money away from something else the city could do, because this is money we're trying to pay back. I mean, that's kind of my perspective. I'm just curious what others think.
Patrick, are you saying all things being equal?
Yes, I'm saying I'm saying, I thought in terms of how we got here and where we're trying to get out of this hole, we're saying, already having to give up some things. We need to get these funds back due to this unfortunate situation with the court case and all the additional
Right.
money we owe. It's not a normal situation, I guess, is my thinking. And I'm already worried that the market may not bear the total we're trying to cover. So now we're talking about further shaving that offer down. And again, I having been on a civic advisory committee and having, all these concerns about meeting our policy objectives, I totally get it. I'm just not sure people are coming to it with the view that we've taken money away from whatever you want to say, schools, open space, city programs, other development opportunities. I don't know.
No, I appreciate that being recentered. Kind of the
think
reasoning
Ben-
for that financial priority. Sorry, Phil.
Sorry, Ben, and I think Ben, you and Campen had indicated perhaps taking 5 points away from the purchase price and putting it towards technical criteria, correct?
Yeah, so he had said 5 instead of 10. So we could also maybe decrease here, whether that's from the financial plan or the financial offer. And I think maybe it would make sense to leave based on this comment, I think maybe leaving the offer as it is and really having that be a large part of this still, that's still 40 points out of 100, specifically on the offer piece of things, split between the actual price and then the timing in which we would expect it. And then we could kind of decrease what's been added to the project understanding of the development concept down from 25 to 20. And that would allow us to still say clearly that we are prioritizing a financial return here. Like that's a big part of the project. But I think part of what the CAC was responding to was also just the how significant the differential probably was between 60 and 40 there, and how small ultimately project understanding and development concept might have felt at 15 points. So maybe having it at 20 is a better balance.
Yeah. I think, and I don't want to speak for Ben, you and Campen, but I think some of that sensitivity in reluctance is based on historical experience with Union Square, with the development development that was selected for that process. I think might have been reflected in various as it relates to deep pockets is probably a better way of saying it. And
Thank you, Phil.
right, Bill. And it'd be nice. Hindsight is 2020, but the markets, boy, it's a real indicator of what's happened in the markets. And unless a developer has the financial wherewithal to develop a sustain over even a short period of time, it's but I might be getting off track here, but I'm kind of disagreeing a little bit with Ben Camp on the
Yeah.
removal of and Patrick, I kind of tend towards what you're thinking there is relative to more points for purchase price.
Yeah, and Phil, or to you, Mr. Chair, just to respond to that, since I was on that Union Square Advisory Committee, I was one of the folks who preferred the alternative, but in terms of hindsight, I'm not sure that an alternative developer could have survived the
Exactly.
storm we've been through.
Exactly.
I mean that it's and it's still going on, right?
Right.
So I don't know. This is not my expertise,
No.
but man, it's taken a lot longer than expected, and so
And we're still not done.
Not by a long shot.
Not by a long shot.
And I mean, my comment kind of follows Phil's in that I was also involved in the Union Square thing. And I really feel strongly that the 50-50 split between technical and financial, I think that's what you need to do here. And
Okay.
I feel really strongly about that because of my experience with Union Square, because I think in the long run, the technical criteria to me is more important than the financial.
Okay. So that's so maybe I guess I want to hear Christine's comment also, but that's maybe a different viewpoint from Patrick. So I would love to kind of come back to get a sense from all SRA members present on whether the 50-50 split makes sense versus having something closer to like a 55 financial 45. And again, it's semantics. I mean, it's not, it's going to be used, but it's partially it's about like what are we trying to represent with this evaluation and table, and like are we trying to show that we're more heavily weighting a financial return just to make that clear in this disposition of land, or are we really trying to say both of these are equally valuable, make sure that the technical component is stronger or is strong. So
Go ahead, Christine.
Oh, I would just say that I think, right, this isn't an exact science, but it's sort of an illustrative
right.
calculation of an embodiment of the goals and objectives of the city and the SRA. And when you go to the other parts of the RFP, like fourth paragraph of our executive summary, we list out the development objectives. And when we went through that, no one commented that it's in the wrong order, but the first objective is financial return. Second is second goes into the technical criteria, mixed use programming and dense transit oriented development. So, and that follows the MOA that we signed with the city council. So I believe something that is greater weighted to financial kind of follows all of that thinking. And whether it's 50, 60-40, I can see why that could be too lopsided, so I'm kind of in the 55-45 camp. And all of that said, though, I mean, the Union Square, I was not here during that process, but that that's, I don't know if people thought it would take as long as it's taking, but I'm sure they thought it would take more than 3 to 5 years. The site is different in that it's likely just one phase of development as opposed to multiple phases. So, deep pockets and financial wherewithal, that while it's important, it may not be as important. Um, so maybe that's why 60-40 is not the right weighting, but 55-45 is, if that makes sense.
I can live with that.
I mean, I can live with it.
Well,
Um,
Ben, you've got
base-
your straw vote.
Okay. I
Yeah,
guess base. Sorry,
I'm
please,
sorry.
Christine.
And I'm just, I know I struggle with this. We are here to recoup, right, what the litigation, the litigation put us in this situation where our charge here as the SRA is to try to recoup as much of the purchase price consideration paid to Corcoran Jennison, but at the same time, the city and likely the CAC has objectives. So on the one hand, you could say, let's just go all in on financial. It doesn't matter what's built here. Like, I don't know. Another casino, they'll pay us 100 million. I'm making this up, and that would give money, that would provide money to the city to go do other things. On the other hand, if the city and the CAC says, we want as much affordable housing here as possible. We know it's not going to yield the same purchase price, but affordable housing is part of, is what everybody wants to see in the city. Why not do it here? Then we have a decision to make as to whether, like, okay, so maybe the city would have spent, and I'm making that, X million dollars somewhere else in the city if we had returned 100% of the litigation proceeds and done that somewhere else. Or
Exactly.
could they instead get half of the litigation or a portion of that litigation and achieve some of the goals of the city here on this site, right? Like it's a give and take.
Right.
Um,
I
Now, to a certain extent, things like schools and roads, right, that just needs money. So it's really also about the priorities of the new administration and where they want to put funds. But anyways, so I'm going off here, but I think I keep coming back to maybe that 55-45 sort of allows one to ponder, if it isn't all financial and if it is about the program or the development that's been proposed, there is a way to see through to that as the winning bid, even though it may not be or provide the maximum proceeds.
Sure. Yeah, and I do think that 55-45, they're close enough that if the qualitative components of a proposal, the technical components in this case, are very different, and there's clearly a project that is put forward that is very strong comparatively, like that 40, even if the financial offers are similar or even slightly higher on projects that have like much weaker technical proposals, they are close enough, like the overall technical and financial weighting is close enough that the better technical project is probably going to come out on top. So that's the first thing I want to note on that if we bring the numbers closer. The other piece is that, on some of these larger, obviously we've had a lot of conversations about kind of what the financial objective is here with this project. And I do think part of the benefit of the process that is set up and the review that happens at the city council is that they'll also have, these larger policy considerations in mind at the time when they are selecting the two to put forward for the SRA to choose from. So we can also kind of lean on them to be keeping a lot of those bigger policy priorities in mind with what they put forward.
Yeah.
Though they're also going to understand the financial impacts of choosing one proposal versus the other, probably best out of anyone in the city, just given their, how familiar they'll be with the budget and the implications of how much funding we get from this.
Okay.
Patrick.
Yeah, I'm just kind of summarizing, repeating, but I think, to Christine's other point, and some of what we're saying is aligning this to what is elsewhere in the RFP. So Ben, as you just said, they're still going to be close if it's 55, 45. But it is sending a message, as much as there is a message or optics, that like, hey, it's pretty important to the city that we get the maximum value. Don't lowball us here. We have to recover some funds, and make this right. So that's why I guess I lean towards something that's yeah, not 60-40, but at least kind of indicates,
Sure.
it conveys our situation.
Right. It's still slightly more weighted in the financial direction.
It-
I want to gauge. Oh, sorry. Please,
No,
Phil.
I was gonna say, Patrick, just to, follow up with that. I mean, I think generally the public will get the message that we are considering both price and the value of the project ultimately, but price particularly. So I think that it shows that I think the SRA is being considerate of both, and it's a split that I think to a normal person is not going to matter much in their life. I just don't. What? So I think it does so send that message that we feel that we're considering what has happened with the litigation and how we have to address it, and that the SRA is sensitive to that. So I think that's fine. I think we should go forward with that.
Are people comfortable generally with, oh, sorry, Christina, I see your hand up. Let me just ask quickly. I just want to say, so for the financial offer, I restored the 40 points. So the financial plan here is still cut by 5. And then for project understanding and development concept, I've still increased that by 5. So that's 20 points total. And a lot of that has gone towards clarity of the proposed development vision and alignment with the city objectives. So that's really making sure it meets those various development objectives. Are people generally comfortable with how this has been reallocated?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And Christine, what were you gonna add?
Oh, so I have the document open in front of me and I'm on another page. And I just saw something. So when in the second section, project background, transit access and connectivity, it mentions that the ride from the East Somerville Green Line station to downtown Boston is a 20-minute ride. I think it's a lot faster than that. And I say that only because it really speaks to the strength of the site.
Yeah, I agree.
I'll note that these have been updated since I got these stats. I just want to flag that.
I think it's so I just Googled it, not that but it said
So
eight to 11 minute ride to downtown Boston.
I guess I think of downtown as being Park, and it takes me 30 minutes to ride from Ball Square, but I will check what the actual stats are on this to see if it is
Yeah,
slightly
because
faster than this.
Ball to East Somerville has got to be.
It's only 3 stops, so it's usually like I would say 6 to 7 minutes.
Yeah, I take it twice a week, mostly to Government Center from Union Square. And you might be waiting a little bit for a train, but it's fast.
Let me look at this later and see if this is
Okay.
slightly faster.
Good catch.
I know we just shifted up from the criteria. I just want to make sure that everyone's comfortable with where we landed there. It looks, I think generally, yes. Right.
Yeah.
Are there any other comments at this point on the document? Okay. I'm going to stop sharing. Live editing is a rush, truly. Is there, would we feel comfortable, straw vote again, would we feel comfortable voting to approve this language with edits? Obviously, there are some edits that are outstanding in terms of, what Christine just mentioned and the piece about the rents in the first section, that we're going to go up and make edits, but those are not super substantive to the overall meaning of the document. So we could vote to approve with edits, anticipating some small edits to come that don't substantively change the document, and then also empower staff to essentially release the RFP in January if people are comfortable.
Yeah. Want to give a thumbs up? All
Okay.
right, there you go.
Um, are there any other questions process-wise before I bring up that vote language?
No.
Okay. I have like roughly drafted something. Kathy, I should have shared this with you ahead. I apologize, but let's more live editing. Okay. So I think something like vote to approve the language of the request for proposals for 90 Washington Street with edits and to release the RFP, publicly in January, and then that gives us enough flexibility. January 12th is the date that we are aiming for right now, but it just gives flexibility when that is.
Ben, before we do that,
Mhm.
do you think it wise that we ask if any members of the public would like
Oh,
to
thank you so much.
speak
Yes,
to us before we go into the vote or for our vote?
that is a great idea. I'm gonna copy this and send it to you in chat, Kathy, and then I will see if any members of the public raise their hands. Okay. So we have 3 members of the public who are currently in attendance. Just want to see if anybody would like to make public comment on any of the matters we've discussed, especially related to the RFP. I will note that multiple members of the 90 Washington Civic Advisory Committee are here. Just give it 60 seconds.
Yeah.
Okay. Through Mr. Chair, I'm not seeing anybody raise their hands.
Okay. So we'll go back to the language that you drafted for the vote.
Yes.
I just made a minor edit.
Thank you, Kathy. Okay. So vote to approve the language of the request for proposals or RFP for 90 Washington Street with edits as discussed. That's what Kathy just added, and to release the RFP publicly in January.
Does that language meet with everyone's? Okay, then that being the case, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I. hereby
Christine Stone
motion.
makes a motion to approve. Is there a second? Patrick McCormick seconds. We'll roll call vote. Courtney Brunson is not here. Ben Ewan Campen is not here this evening. William Gage,
Yes.
Patrick McCormick,
Yes,
Christine Stone,
Yes,
myself, Phil Ercolini, have voted to approve the vote. Okay. We're done with that, Ben.
That's all I have. Yes.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda is item number 4, which is a meeting cadence reset in January.
Hey everyone. I'm going to take a moment to reintroduce myself. I'm Katie Weiss, and I will be taking on many of the responsibilities that Ben has handled as liaison. So you'll be seeing a lot more communication from me, and we're taking the opportunity in the new year with the new council being seated to gauge everybody's availability for the new year in order to potentially reset this meeting cadence. So just wanted to give everyone a heads up that you'll be hearing from me in 2026.
Okay. So we don't have to make any decisions this evening, correct?
Nope, that's
Okay,
right.
Katie, thank you. But let me see. So, but for all intent and purposes, I guess, the board is still comfortable with meeting on the second Tuesday of each month.
Through you, Mr. Chair. This one's going to be heavily dependent, I think, on Counselor Ewan Campen's assignments.
Okay,
Because
Gotcha.
they redo committee assignments, and one of the conflicts that has come up has actually been with one of his committee seats that wasn't anticipated. So, and Kathy often also has to go to speak to a committee on this evening. So the second Tuesday might not end up working, but again, it'll be based on the availability that Katie pulls from everyone.
Okay, all right.
And through you, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
So Ben, they redo the committee assignments, but the council doesn't read, including the assignment to the SRA.
So, through Mr. Chair to Member McCormick, I don't know the exact process for making these assignments, but yes, like technically they will, like they have to re-articulate who is assigned. It is potentially still Counselor Ewan Campen. Obviously, that would be great for consistency, and he understands the projects that the Redevelopment Authority works on. I'm not sure exactly what goes into making those decisions. Technically, it can change.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Okay. All right, the next item on the agenda is a request for a meeting adjournment. So I'll entertain a motion that we adjourn until we meet again. William Gage makes a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? Patrick McCormick seconds. Roll call vote. Courtney Brunson is not here this evening. Ben Ewan Campen is also not here. William Gage,
Yes.
Patrick McCormick,
Yes.
Christine Stone, and myself, Phil Ercolini, have voted to adjourn. All right, everybody. Have a great holiday season.
Yeah. You too. See you
Yeah.
next
Great
year.
holiday, everyone.
See you next
Thanks,
year.
everybody.